Okay, let's jump into this. The Errol Flynns.
Right.
When you hear that, I mean, you think Hollywood, right? Swashbuckling adventure.
Exactly. Not exactly Detroit street gangs in the 70s.
But that's what we're talking about. A gang known for this really flamboyant style.
And the hand signs, too, the gangsta jits.
Yeah, get this. They apparently came from territorial dances. One dance was actually called the Errol Flynn.
And it's such a strange collision, isn't it? Hollywood fantasy meeting, while gritty urban reality.
It really is. Tells you right away, this isn't your typical story.
No, there's definitely something more complex going on, culturally speaking.
So that's what we're diving into today. The history, the impact, the whole story of the Errol Flynns.
Trying to piece together this maybe overlooked bit of Detroit history.
Exactly. And to really get it, we kind of have to picture Detroit back then, the 1970s.
Oh, yeah. A really turbulent time.
You've got major racial tension, economic problems, people leaving the city for the suburbs, that whole white flight phenomenon.
Infrastructure crumbling, crime rates going up.
And gangs starting to carve out territories. It was the backdrop for groups like the Errol Flynns.
And you see that pattern elsewhere too, right? These big social and economic disruptions.
Definitely.
They break down old structures, and sometimes new groups, new kinds of organizations spring up to fill that gap, offering something, maybe belonging, maybe
Opportunity.
right. And that's the setting. Detroit's Lower East Side, 1970s, that's where the Errol Flynns started.
And they picked that name, Errol Flynn, deliberately.
Yeah, and cultivated this whole image of flamboyant gangsters. It sounds almost like they were playing a role.
Well, maybe that image was the appeal, especially for young people.
You think, in that environment.
Think about it. In a place with a lot of poverty, decay, maybe projecting success, projecting style, even if it's, outside the law, maybe that was powerful.
Like a way to build an identity, something different from the surroundings.
Could be a way of saying, we stand out.
And it wasn't just style in a vacuum. The sources mentioned the big demographic shifts happening then, too.
Or in the city itself.
Public housing, like Herman Gardens, apparently changed really fast.
Yeah.
Became mostly black communities quite quickly.
And those rapid changes within neighborhoods, they can disrupt things. Old social ties might fray.
Creating space for new groups.
Yeah, potentially. Space for groups like the Errol Flynns to kind of grow and gain influence in those specific areas.
Okay, so they've got the name, the look. They're in this specific time and place. What were they actually doing?
Well, the sources point to them becoming a pretty serious criminal operation.
Rackets like extortion, robbery.
And drug trafficking. Heroin, mostly, in the early days, it seems.
So not just petty stuff. They were organized.
Seems that way. It suggests a certain level of ambition, building a presence.
And they weren't exactly low-key about it either. There was that incident in '76 at Cobo Hall.
Oh, the rock concert, hijacking, yeah.
I mean, hijacking a concert.
Yeah.
Robbing people right there. That's incredibly bold.
Extremely. Speaks volumes about how powerful they must have felt or how much they disregarded consequences.
Apparently, it even brought out the riot police.
Doesn't surprise me. That kind of public act, it forces a response. You can't ignore that.
And they were big at their peak. Maybe close to 400 members.
That's a significant force on the streets, real influence.
But that kind of high profile, it eventually catches up with you, right?
Usually does. More attention from law enforcement, from the community. It puts pressure on.
Which kind of leads into their decline in the 80s. It wasn't just one thing, sounds like.
No, a mix of factors. The drug scene was changing dramatically.
Crack cocaine.
Exactly. Crack really exploded, and it totally undercut the heroin market they'd been dominating, changed the whole economy of the drug trade.
At the same time, the police were having more success.
Yeah, major prosecutions, key leaders getting locked up. That really dismantles an organization from the top down, weakens the structure.
So the original Errol Flynns kind of faded out as an organization then?
Seems so, but their impact didn't just disappear.
No, they're seen as like precursors, right, to a lot of later Detroit gangs.
Definitely. They set a certain pattern, perhaps.
And you see it in the names of the gangs that came after. Be Like Boys, Dexter Boys, Schoolcraft Boys, or SCBs.
7 Mile Killers, Linwood Boys, Jeffries Boys, 8 Mile Sconies. Lots of them.
And what's interesting is most of those names, except maybe Be Like Boys, they're tied to places, streets, projects.
Right. That reinforces the territorial aspect. Naming yourself after your turf, claiming that space, it's about identity and control of a neighborhood.
And some of those groups, or versions of them, apparently still exist today.
Sources suggest that, yeah. Which tells you something about the persistence of these issues, these gang structures in certain areas.
Okay, but here's a twist I did not see coming.
Oh.
One of the former members of the Errol Flynns, Greg Mathis.
Wait, Judge Greg Mathis.
The very same. The guy with the TV court show, Judge Mathis, that ran for, 24 seasons, an Emmy winner.
Wow. Okay, that is unexpected.
Right. He was apparently part of the gang in his youth. He even wrote about it in his memoir, Inner City Miracle.
That's quite a journey, from gang member to celebrated judge and TV personality.
Incredible. We also know a couple of other names. Earl Smith, apparently a co-founder, and someone called Dancing Dan.
Mathis's story, though, it's powerful. It shows that, people's paths aren't fixed. Change is possible, even from really difficult circumstances.
A real counter-narrative to the usual gang story. His long career certainly reached a lot of people.
Absolutely. It offers a different perspective.
So, wrapping this up, the Errol Flynns, it's this snapshot of 1970s Detroit, isn't it?
A product of all those specific social economic forces we talked about.
With this bizarre Hollywood-inspired name and style, their own sort of sign language.
Their rise through crime, the heroin trade.
And the fall with crack and the arrests. But leaving this legacy influencing later gangs.
And that unexpected connection to someone like Judge Mathis.
It really paints a picture of complexity.
It does. You can't just look at a group like this in isolation.
Yeah.
You have to see the context, the bigger picture of what was happening in the city, culturally, economically.
Yeah. So maybe a final thought for everyone listening.
Go for it.
What does this whole story, the crime, the Hollywood flair, the eventual link to the judicial system, even what does it tell us about city life? About how people find identity,
And about the possibility for change, for transformation.
Exactly. It makes you think about the individual lives caught up in these larger historical moments, doesn't it?
It really does. A lot to unpack there.